how are you today? So it is not lick of the day. Today, it is my birthday. And because it's my birthday, I shaved my beard off to create the illusion that I'm younger than I just became. Look, my daughter gave me a great ring. Who would buy? I would not buy that kind of ring for myself. But she bought it for me. So it's very bling, and I feel happy today. So anyways, for my birthday, I'm giving everybody a little present here. And I promised it about a month ago. I'm going to start like a manual or a book or whatever you want to call it on Barry Harris's Chromatic scale. And I'm doing it sort of like a chapter at a time. So it could end up, I don't really know yet. It could end up 40, 50 pages. Who knows? Maybe 100 pages. I don't really know. But I'm going to take it right from the beginning. And we're going to go through it. So today we're going to start taking baby steps with Barry's scale. And this is really more just like of a workout session to get started with. Now, the PDF, it's going to be available chapter by chapter on Patreon. So, you know, if you want to work with that, which makes the whole thing a little bit easier, I think, just go there and get it. And, you know, also, I hope you do get it because, you know, it's good. You can, if you're teaching, you want to teach your students, it'll save you a lot of time because I'm really meticulous about putting it together. And another thing I just have to say, this is, you know, Barry Harris is like a genius. And, you know, I found this stuff through other various sources. It's not like I'm, you know, coming up with it all on my own. You know, I really suggest that you go to the YouTube channel, Things I Learned from Barry Harris, which I get a lot of this information from. It's always, when I feel like I'm not moving in a good direction, I just go there and I manage to find something that's very inspiring. You know, I can always find something every time I look at it. I get some new great ideas. Okay, so keep that in mind too. I'll post the link as well. Okay, so anyways, now Barry's chromatic scale. Now, you got to remember here, I think musicians that are a little bit more experienced will understand this very well. But there's generally, at least in my opinion, there's 3 different stages for learning anything. The first thing is you have to get the information, right? And what could that information could be like a theoretic concept or a physical technique, or it could be various things, right? So today the information is going to be Barry Harris's scale, chromatic scale, how to play it, and the concept behind it and the theoretic information, right? Now, a lot of times, and I think experienced musicians do this too, because I do this myself sometimes. Sometimes we get the theoretic information and we understand it and we sort of stop there. It's like, oh, I sort of understand what's going on. And then we think that we'll work on it later. And, you know, that's fine. That's all right. But that's only the first step though, right? So the next step is that anytime you get something that, you know, that you're supposed to work on, after getting the information, which I'm going to give you today, you have to do the mechanics and play it over and over and over again until it becomes natural. And what happens generally is your fingers will remember the patterns, but also your ears will remember the sound. And when it gets to that point, your fingers and you can use those without debating too much about how to do it. It becomes natural to you, and you'd start to develop an intuition about how to apply these things. And until it gets to that point, it's hard to get to the next stage, which is making music out of it, okay? So now, when you practice these patterns, I suggest that you maybe at first you do it with a metronome. And I don't know, there's always musicians always argue about it for how important the metronome is. Metronome is important, I think, because at least if nothing else, it develops like an internal metronome, you know, by using it all the time. But at one point, you have to play these things against chords. And that's how you really sort of develop an intuition for the sound of these scales, okay? So that's how we're going to do it today. And then finally, you have to sort of try to put them into action as soon as possible. I'm always very anxious to turn these things into music. I don't really want it to end at learning the mechanics. I really want it to turn into something as quick as possible. So I generally sort of take the approach that I'm going to turn it into something musical quick that I can use right away, and then move on to the next step. And so that's what we're going to do today, all right? So regarding Barry's scale, he came up with the chromatic scale, and it's got guidelines to it. And so it's important to learn the guidelines. When I started to study jazz, I didn't come from a jazz background. I still don't really consider myself a jazz guitar player. But people always said it's all about chromaticism. And I never understood that very well until Barry Harris came around and I discovered him. And I figured out that there's an important rhythmic point about chromaticism. It's where the chromatic notes go. And so Barry came up with a system that will always have you playing the chromatic notes on the weak beats and the scale tones on the strong beats. So today, for example's sake, we're just playing over a G7 chord. And I'm going to use this more of like a blues thing, even though it's really a jazz concept. So, you know, you can turn around and use it for jazz right away. But, you know, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm using over just a blues in G, okay? And at first, we're just going to play over the G chord. But now, if you're playing over G chord, a G7 chord, it's the 5 chord in C major. So that means a C major scale is going to work over G7, right? Now, it's not really the best sounding choice, but Barry's system will fix that. But let's just listen to it anyways, okay? So I'm going to play the C major scale over just a G7 vamp. Right? That's just, we know this as the Mixolydian mode, or, you know, but it's just a C major scale. So that's really all you need to know. So the pattern that we're using today to work on this chromatic scale, it's just this pattern. Right? So it's going to show up somewhere over here, okay? So if you don't know that scale, you're going to have a problem with this, I think. But, you know, so make sure you got your major scale patterns under your fingers, okay? So next, here's the rule with Barry's chromatic scale. If you have a half step in the scale, for instance, like here, remember, here's the C, the B's a half step below, right? Barry Harris says you can't go directly there. Why? Because if this is 1, the next scale tone is going to be end. It's a weak beat, and you don't want it on the weak beat. So you have to skip up to a note above and continue down that way. But for the sake of simplicity, I don't really want to jump out of the scale. So let's consider this B note sort of like the first note, okay? And it's the third of the G7 chord anyway, so it's a good note to start on. Anyway, so between B and A, right, there's a whole step, right? So we can put a chromatic note in between. Now between A and G, it's also a whole step apart. There's a chromatic note that we can put in between there too. Now between the G and the F, It's also the whole step, so you can put a chromatic note in between there. Now, you got that half step, right? Between F and E. So we got to jump back to the G note like this. And then play the E note. It's going to sound like this. Okay, now between E and D, there's a whole step. You can put a chromatic note in between. Now between the D and the C, whole step. Chromatic note goes in between. Now B, remember, between C and B, it's a half step. You got to jump back up and then go down to it. And that's how the scale is going to work. So this will really work with any scale pattern. If there's a half step, jump above. Is that the only way you can do it? It isn't. There's different ways you can do it. But just for the sake of today's lesson, let's do it this way, right? You can, after you learn about it conceptually, you can figure out other notes that you can skip to so that, you know, the scale tones land on the strong beats, you know, the down beats, right? So I'm suggesting, for practice sake, that we do these one at a time. So starting from B. Next, we're going to go from A. Okay. Next from G. Next from F. Now, the problem with F is that it's a half step right away, so you got to jump. It's going to go up the second note, right? Okay. If you're struggling with this, get the PDF. Next, E. Right? Now next note is D. Next note is C. Again, it's a half step is right away, so you jump up. Right, so next B. Right, next A. And that's as far as you can go, right? I mean, you could go further, but you're going to jump out of the scale pattern that we're working with, right? So my advice is that for, like, you know, getting into, you know, playing it against music, why don't you, like, take time? This is just descending. Next lesson is going to be ascending, okay? I'm going to take this one step at a time. We don't want to go crazy here, make ourselves go crazy. So next up, like I said, continue on playing these. And just descending is fine for now until you remember them and they become easy for you and you develop an intuition and you're not looking at your fingers all the time and it becomes sort of a natural thing, okay? Now, the next step that you want to take is that in order to develop intuition for playing the scale, you want to play it over chords. So I'm just taking a G vamp. Now, this is sort of the fun part, really, because certain notes you land on might not appeal to you. It's all a matter of opinion, of course. Your ear is different than my ear. So you want to try to figure a way to resolve or to fix that little problem, right? And that's what jazz is about, really. You create some tension and then you figure out on the spot how you're going to resolve that tension. And that's what jazz is about. So let's, like, take these one at a time and try to look for, like, chord tones and ways to get out of, you know, little situations that might occur, okay? So here we go. I'm going to do this against a G7 vamp, And, you know, when you listen to it, maybe you repeat the video and you sort of play along with me, okay? Okay, so here we go. Okay, how did that work for you? Did it work? So, you know, maybe the next step is that, you know, you try to mix this in a little bit with, you know, some like blues kinds of licks or something you might play over a dominant chord. So let me just, you know, randomly do some stuff like that. Okay, so this is how you sort of develop, you know, your ear to listen to this chromatic scale. Okay, so next, you got to try to put this into action, right? So, because I mean, how often do you just play over a G7 chord for a half hour, right? So let's think about putting this in a blues. So my suggestion first is that, you know, let's just say we're playing a G blues with a quick change. Well, let's look for some chord tones for that C7 chord, which is the 4 chord, right? So if we start from the top, we're going to go like this, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now this is 1, where that 4 chord is going to pop up, and we're right on the E, which is the 3rd of that chord, right? So that's great. So, you know, I'm going to take some chord tones in this position for that C7 chord. Look. These are all C7 notes, right? So if we end there, why don't I just, you know, for just example's sake, sounds good. Let's try it. it good? I think it was good. So now let's go for the next note. There's A note. What's going to happen there? Remember, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then the next note is going to be that something for that C note. So a C chord. So that would be the end of 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... So why don't I jump back to that E note? The same sort of thing. Sounds good to me. Good, right? Okay, so some of these things become more problematic than others. What if we go from the G? We end right on a C. That's easy. That's the root of that next chord. Going down an arpeggio. Okay, let's listen to that. That's easy enough, right? Next, from the F, let's see what happens there. Well, that would bring us to B, which would be weird for a C7 chord, right? It's like a major 7. So let's just play that root again. Good, right? Next, we're on E, okay? Maybe C's good there too. Let's try it. So you want to continue on from every note and see, find creative ways to resolve it. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. You can think on your feet a lot better, after practicing this a bunch of times, okay? So next, how about when that C chord comes around when that G chord comes around again, right? Remember, because we have a bar of G and we have a bar of C, and then we have 2 bars of G and 2 bars of C. So let's start from the same places again, right? So we're going to go from B. Then we got G again. So let's go from the A this time. But remember, we got 2 measures. Ooh, that takes us all the way to G, which is also the 5th of the C7 chord. So what do we got here? Some notes from that G7 chord, right? So those worked great, right? Next, let's look at what if we start from G. Good. Now next, let's go from F, just for the sake of making this an exercise. We're going down one at a time. Now it's going to go. Ooh, that takes us to E, which is the third of that C7 chord, right? So that's not going to be a problem at all. Good, right? So next, we went B, we did A, we did G. So next we're going to go for, I have a feeling that we're going to start to get into a little bit of, you know, problem solving here. So let's see what happens when we go from E. Okay, that'll work. Next, we're going to go from D, right? Ooh, that takes us to C, so that does sort of work out, right? What happened? From E. Right? From E. From D. Yeah, okay, that'll work. Okay, so this is the way that I suggest that you start to get this into your playing. Now, I consider myself like a rock and blues player, you know, but, you know, try this over standards. Any kind of jazz standard that has pockets of, you know, diatonic chords, it'll work fine. It's not just over the dominant chord. I mean, so, you know, in a 2-5-1, that's, if it's a 2-5-1 in C, well, that's D minor and G7, right? Well, that's the same thing you can do right there. The main point of this is that you don't have to think so much about chord tones. You just sort of start in different notes and you figure out how to resolve them in ways that satisfies your ear, okay? So that's where I'm going to leave it today. My suggestion is that if you want to review this, of course, look at the video this video. But also, if you want the PDF, I have these written out one by one. So I think it'll be a good resource for you to study from and also to teach from if you want to start teaching this method, okay? All right, so have a nice day. And I hope that this video was fun and entertaining and also gave you some pertinent information that you can use on your journey as a guitar player. All right, so goodbye.